right? I think we're pretty much good to go. Um, Welcome everybody to a webinar on the rental housing development NOFOs. I am Bryce Farbstein. I'm a policy analyst with the Office of Housing Finance. Thank you for being here. I want to give a quick minute, if I can, for introductions. Kim, I believe you may want to say a quick hello, and John and the Deputy Commissioner's team, maybe also a quick hello.
I'll start. So I'm John Stovall. I'm the Senior Manager for Policy and Special Projects. I work under our Deputy Commissioner for Housing Assistance and Development, Maureen Freehill, who many of you all know. I think we would have to invite Kim to come off mute. So Dylan, if you would be willing to do that for Kim so that she can introduce herself.
Yeah, he's got me. Thank you for that, John. Thanks so much for joining us today. I see we've got a really full house. We hope that this is helpful for you today, as well as the resource itself being helpful for your projects in 2026. So thanks for everyone for being here, and looking forward to learning along with y'all.
I'll jump in. Good afternoon. My name is Tarika Dorner, and I'm the project manager for training and outreach, also under the Deputy Commissioner's Office, Maureen Freehill.
Hi, everybody. I will round it out. My name is Dylan Simmons. I am the senior lead, also under the Deputy Commissioner, Maureen Freehill, and working with John.
And Dylan, do you see, is Maureen on? No worries if not.
I do not believe so.
Okay, no worries. Pass it back to you, Bryce.
It's like Bryce might be having a connection issue. I realize I didn't actually introduce myself. I'm sorry. I'll do that to fill the time here a little bit. My name is Kim Gold, and I'm the director of the Office of Housing Finance. So all things LIHTC until you get your 8609s happens in our office.
Awesome.
See, good timing, and there's Bryce.
Thank you. Yes,
Okay,
switched my internet point there for a second. Thank you. All right, so thank you, Kim and John and Tarika and Dylan and everybody who's attending here. We're just going to, for those of you who attended the QAP workshop last week, some of this is going to be a recap or a review of that. But if you're not, then it'll be new. But these slides will all be posted available. The QAP workshop slides are also posted on the website, but these webinar slides will also be posted for your convenience. And for if you're not aware already, we're already doing a recording for this as well. So the recording will also be available. A couple other small housekeeping things. If you do have a question, please raise your hand so we can unmute you. We will have a small Q&A following every NOFO. So we're going to do the supportive housing NOFO first, and then following that, we'll have questions, a time for questions about the supportive housing NOFO, and then we'll go ahead and do the other two NOFOs and have Q&A for those two NOFOs following that. So there will have some intermittent Q&A time, but just raise your hands if you need and have any urgent questions in the meantime. And you can also use the chat, which we're monitoring as well, so for questions. So feel free to use the chat as well. And with that, I believe we're ready to dive into the supportive housing NOFO.
All right. Thanks, Bryce. And thanks everybody for joining today. It's an action-packed, densely condensed webinar of 3 different NOFOs for us to talk about. So I'm going to get started with our single-site supportive housing NOFO, which utilizes National Housing Trust Fund funding. from DCA. I would just want to start off real quick. Many of y'all may know this. If you're here and you're already interested in this NOFO, you probably know what supportive housing is. But if not, this is our working definition at DCA. You can find this language in the NOFO itself and in previous presentations we've been using. But in a nutshell, it's essentially a housing intervention that combines affordable housing assistance with voluntary support services. Typically, you're going to be addressing the needs of more vulnerable populations, including people who have experienced chronic homelessness or who have other vulnerabilities or needs that require them to seek additional services along with their housing. And the services typically are going to be designed to build independent living skills, tenancy skills, but also connecting people with community-based healthcare, treatment, employment services, housing stability services. You know, the list can go on, but that's kind of a general nutshell there. And then I'm going to, of course, flag it's not mine, this is the kind of common thing that's used, but the three-legged stool of supportive housing includes housing availability. So that's, you've got the units that are available, you've got housing subsidy, which makes the unit affordable, and then you've got the supportive services. And you kind of have to have all three in order for your stool to remain upright. So obviously this NOFO is for single site supportive housing. So what does that mean? What's the difference between that and kind of what we typically just talk about with supportive housing? So single site supportive housing is a model of supportive housing in which the affordable housing development dedicates more than, and this is DCA's definition. So this may not be true in other states, but this is how we are talking about single site. You're dedicating greater than 25% and up to 100% of the units in that property to supportive housing. And that's in conjunction with on-site and other community-based supportive services. You really want to see the owner, the property manager, coordinating with one or more supportive service providers to design and deliver the services for the tenants in order to support housing stability. So I guess the difference here is that you may be familiar with our integrated supportive housing points in the QAP, and that is limited to up to 25%, but we're talking about utilizing more than 25% of the units for supportive housing with single site. Just this is kind of like some background language around, you know, who is often served in supportive housing. You might see aging adults, veterans, transition age youth, people who have experienced chronic homelessness, domestic violence, survivors, et cetera, et cetera. These are common populations that might be served by supportive housing. And this is just a little plug for those who are familiar already or not. Supportive housing has a lot of research that has gone into it in terms of the outcomes related to housing retention, days in shelter, returns to shelter, reducing psychiatric hospitalizations, reducing emergency room visits, reducing the number of days people spend in jail, and overall community savings regarding reduced incarceration. So supportive housing is a model that really works to make kind of community-wide improvements. So when we talk about supportive housing, there's a lot of different models, or maybe a handful of different models. And what we're talking about today is really the single-site supportive housing model. Other programs might be working on a voucher-based model or a sponsor-based model, or that integrated model that we talked about before, where you're setting aside a small number of units in a property. But today we're really focused on our single-site model. And so I just quickly wanted to touch on DCA's overall supportive housing pipeline that we've been working to develop and build out over the last couple of years. There's kind of two big components to it. One is we partner with the Corporation for Supportive Housing to do our annual Supportive Housing Institute. That has been a really great opportunity that has made itself available in Georgia. Thank you to CSH for all the work that goes into that. The goal there is to build our knowledge, our collective knowledge and capacity around supportive housing development. And so teams get to go through the institute. You apply, and then you can be selected competitively to participate in the institute. It's a 5-month-long training that goes from September through January. And the teams include a developer, a property manager, a service provider, and they can be, there can be additional team members as well. You might have a housing authority, somebody with lived experience, local community leaders, things like that. And then you're working as a team on a real project concept to go through the institute and get technical assistance along the way. And so we've had 2 rounds of the institute be completed so far and have seen good results there. So the other piece of our supportive housing pipeline is the development funding. And so that's why you're all here today to learn about the 2026 single site supportive housing NOFO through National Housing Trust Fund money. We had a round of this last year, and we made a couple awards to fund over 100 new units of supportive housing. And so we're having round 2 of the trust fund supportive housing development NOFO this year. So if you want to know how to find the NOFO, which maybe everyone knows this already, but if you don't, this is the easiest way to do it. So if you go to dca.ga.gov, that's the DCA homepage, and you go to the top left corner, and you can hover where it says About, and then click Newsroom. If you go to our newsroom, there's a public notices link there, and that's pretty much where you're going to find most of DCA's NOFOs that come out. So you'll see the 3 NOFOs that we're going to talk about today, but you'll also see several others there. So that's a good link to just bookmark. Okay, so that was some background, but now we're getting into the nuts and bolts of the supportive housing NOFO. In terms of the funding that's available this year, we've got roughly $4 million in National Housing Trust Fund. The purpose is going to be for construction, rehabilitation, or preservation of single-site supportive housing. Awards have an award minimum of $2 million and an award maximum of $4 million. These are going to be low-interest loans. The terms of the loans are going to be determined through underwriting. Just keep that in mind. We're not kind of pre-specifying what those interest rates are or what the terms are from the beginning. In terms of what it means to be awarded, there's kind of 2 pieces to it. If you are selected under the NOFO, your award is going to be contingent on receiving an award through the 9% tax credit award round this coming year in 2026. And also, if you're awarded through this NOFO, then your project will receive a letter for favorable financing points for your LIHTC application. So this is utilizing National Housing Trust Fund, and so if you're familiar with the QAP, there's a favorable financing section that can get you points. And so this letter could help you, receive those or claim those points in your tax credit application. The applications are open currently. We open them on January 23rd, and they will close on March 12th. And I have a little asterisk there just because I want to flag. We were originally closing the applications, I think, on the 6th or the 9th, and I've already forgotten, but we moved it to the 12th. So, and that was just to acknowledge that there was a significant event on our previous due date that many of the developers were going to be in the middle of. So move that deadline to the 12th. We're all here today at our informational webinar about the NOFO. And if you have questions, reach out to supportivehousing@dca.ga.gov. That is going to be the email address that I'm monitoring and we're monitoring regarding this supportive housing NOFO. So I want to just first go through how do you submit an application. So again, we've got the deadline there, March 12th, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time is the deadline. You're going to submit your application through the Emphasis portal, and the link to the application portal is on our NOFO webpage, which I just told you how to get to. So you'll complete the whole application, and then you will also complete, there's a new section that we're adding into this NOFO that it's a tab on the left side, and it's called supportive housing, but it asks a few specific questions that we didn't previously ask that will help us when we kind of pull all the applications, and we can pull reports based on it. And it'll also help you kind of be more specific to us about like what are the supportive housing units you are proposing look like in your application. And I also wanted to flag that if you are applying for the 9% tax credit round, this supportive housing section is going to be in that application as well. So you can carry over those same answers to those supportive housing questions. When you are submitting your application, please upload all of the required documents, and I'll go through what those are. But upload those, and as well as any additional documents, the ones that may not be required, but you definitely want to include in your application. Upload those into Emphasis. We won't be accepting applications through a separate email address. Don't send your application to us at that supportive housing email address I just shared. Everything should be in Emphasis when you click Submit, and that's where we'll pull your application from. Okay, so here is the required documentation that you're going to want to upload with your application. We are going to require narratives. So we have a 2-page executive summary, as well as additional rating factor narratives that will be a big portion of how the scoring is determined. The 2-page executive summary is really intended for us to get a snapshot of your project, and then the additional rating factor narratives will be will give you a chance to go deeper into your description of your work. The supporting documentation, there are a couple things that we do require or suggest in the rating factor narratives that would be additional supporting documentation. I'm just including an example here because it's, and I'll pull up a slide that has a picture of it in a second, but site maps will be an additional supporting document that would be helpful during one of the rating factor sections. You will need to submit your LIHTC qualifications determination. There is a deadline coming up February 27th to submit that for the 9% tax credit round. So incorporate that as part of your NOFO application as well. You will need to supply or submit your LIHTC core app. Minus a couple tabs. You don't need to submit you don't need to complete the threshold or the scoring tabs, but please complete the rest of it and upload that as part of your application. And then you will complete the supportive services plan and budget document. That is linked on the NOFO webpage. You should be able to easily download it and complete it. And I'm going to do a quick little run through of that document during this training. You will also need to submit evidence of agreements between your developer, property manager, and service providers. We're not requiring fully executed MOUs upon your initial application. However, at a minimum, you should have some kind of a letter of commitment from your service providers or from your referring entity, just so that we can tell that there has been coordination on your project leading up to this application. I want to note that in comparison to the integrated supportive housing section of the QAP, where we do have a list of published referring entities that developers have to choose from in terms of working with them for referrals, the single site NOFO does not require you to use those referring entities for referrals or for services. So you can work with a partner that you choose. And we are requiring a preliminary commitment of project-based rental assistance as part of your application. And so that should be submitted. The award letter or preliminary commitment letter should be submitted with your application. So some additional documents that you may upload if they are applicable to you is if you participated in the Georgia Supportive Housing Institute, you will receive a letter from CSH, and that will be your participation letter. Also, if you would like to receive a quality endorsement from CSH, they will assess your project ahead of time if you reach out to them and request it. And that quality endorsement letter will basically, it's kind of a stamp of approval from CSH saying this is going to be a quality supportive housing project. And so you can request one by emailing cshsoutheast@csh.org. Please request that prior to February 15th or 16th or earlier if possible to give them a chance to connect with you and do the endorsement. And so if you are able to obtain the quality endorsement letter, then be sure to submit that as part of your application. There is a fee in order to get the quality endorsement letter unless your team participated in the Supportive Housing Institute, in which case that fee is waived. So I'm going to go through the narrative rating factors. These are going to be where the where your scoring component of the application comes in. So there's 100 points total. There are 4 sections, and then each section has a breakdown of points. So obviously, the higher the points, the better. Project team experience is going to be a total of 35 points. We've broken it down so that your developer experience is 10 points, property manager experience is 10 points, service provider 10 points. And these are all areas where you are demonstrating the experience of each of the members of your project team. And then if you want to get an additional 5 points in this section, that is that's 5 points if you've participated and you've got the letter from the Supportive Housing Institute for either this year or last year. Strength of project concept and partnerships, 45 points total. We're looking in depth at the project concept for 20 points. We're looking at the strength of your partnerships between each of the members of your project team, as well as partnerships in the community. That is a total of 16 points. We're offering up to 4 points for if your project will commit to a higher unit count. So, part of what we're trying to incentivize here is the projects that will commit to providing more supportive housing units in the property. And if you're able to receive a quality endorsement from CSH, then you can receive an additional 5 competitive points. Okay, so continuing on with the narrative rating factors, we got data-informed, local need, and community engagement. 5 points here for demonstrating the unmet need in the community that you are proposing to build your supportive housing in. And then 5 additional points for demonstration of community engagement. And then finally, if you're able to leverage funding specifically for supportive services, then that is, and that's for I think it's a minimum of 3 years, then that is an additional 5 points for you. Okay, so moving through, this is kind of like a screenshot of the narrative rating factors. I wanted to just highlight this part of it because it might be easy to miss this if you're not looking for it. So on the left, you got the rating factor, what it is, the number of points you could get in the second column, and in the third column is a description of kind of what we're asking you to demonstrate. But on the left there's the maximum number of pages that you can use for your narrative, as well as additional documents that we want to see you submit. So, under project team experience, submitting your qualifications determination is one of the requirements. And then if you have a participation letter in the institute, that one is optional, but if you have it, you can submit that. So make sure you look at this little section in each of the rating factor sections. Okay, so I want to just give a quick little run through of the supportive services plan and budget, because if you maybe you didn't submit an application in last year's NOFO, and this is the first time you're seeing this document. It's new. It's not something that we really use in many of our other NOFOs or other development opportunities. So the purpose of it, though, is to make sure that we're getting something from you that helps us assess what your proposed supportive services plan looks like programmatically, as well as how you plan to pay for those services, so that we can get a sense of, how intense are the services going to be? Are they more of a light touch? How many units are they going to serve? What are caseloads looking like? How long is the funding going to last? Those kind of questions. And so we've got several tabs that we have built into this document, including just an overall program summary, a services plan, which is more in depth, and then there's a budget for year 1, a budget for year 2, and 3 and 4 and 5. And so I'll pull up this document in a second so that we can walk through it just briefly together. Yeah, so give me a second to pull that up and I will do that. We are only requiring this services plan and budget at the moment for our single site supportive housing projects. So if you are thinking about applying for those integrated supportive housing points in the QAP, that's currently not a requirement to submit a services plan and budget for that. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second and then I'll share it in just a moment.
And John, since you just covered the budgets and plans, you had a question in the chat from Rochelle about what's due and the MOUs.
Okay.
Perhaps you can sort through that.
Yeah, let me share through this, and then at the end of when I finish my slides, I'll come back to all the questions if that's okay. Okay. So again, you're going to go, if you want to find this document, you're going to go to our single site supportive housing NOFO page on the DCA website. And if you scroll down to important documents, you'll find this one that you can download. So we have an instructions tab here. This should give you a sense of how to complete the document. The only ones to change are going to be the blue ones. Don't change the ones in green. If you have questions, contact supportive housing at DCA. And then make sure you save this document in this particular naming convention when you submit it, and that will help us find it later if we're looking for these documents. So if you go to project information and summary, this is going to be like our real overall overall summary of the services plan and budget. Again, you're just going to fill in the number. You're going to fill in the cells that are blue. So you're going to say project name. That's where you type in the name of your project. You're going to identify the number of units with supportive services, the number of supportive housing units here in this tab. So you can change it from 20 to 10 or 30 or 50 or whatever it is for your project. And then be sure to complete this information here. So service providers that you are working with closely, and these should be the ones that you might have an MOU with or a letter of support from them. We're not thinking about sort of community providers that you may have some kind of light touch for referrals to, but we're thinking about people that are actively working with you on your development. So you will type in the name of that organization here, and then make sure to include their address and contact information, as well as whether you have an executed MOU or contract with them at this point. For your initial submission, like I said, you don't have to have an MOU right away, but we will require that as part of the tax credit threshold submissions which is down the road, assuming you get awarded under the NOFO and then assuming you get awarded under the 9% round. So then going to the services plan, this tab here, it is fairly extensive, and it should be, because we want to have a sense of what are all the details of your services that are going to be provided here, and how well have you thought this through. However, the services plan tab is not required upon your initial submission. This should be completed as part of your threshold application, again, with the tax credit threshold submissions later, again, assuming that you are awarded. So the services plan, this is like more extensive and will be submitted later. But in terms of what should be submitted and completed upon your NOFO application, you should complete the project info and summary page, the program summary tab. So again, you will complete the number of units that are going to be served by each service provider, and then you can just select sort of which of these services are going to be provided through your partnerships. So you basically just do the drop down and say this one is offered. If it's not going to be offered, then you just leave it blank. Credit repair, service offered. And then if you have another service provider that you're working with, then you'll just do the same. Okay, so this one's offering legal services and mental health services. So that's a general way you can do that. If you have other notes to add, you can add them down here. And then each budget page is essentially a revenue and expenses page, starting with the expenses at the top. So please complete this for each of your service providers. They should automatically populate with totals. And then at the bottom, this is how you're going to show how your, where your revenue sources are coming from to pay for these services. And if you have something else that's not listed here, you just put it in the notes. And then budget number year 2 and 3, 4, and 5, they're all exactly the same. But please do complete each one of these budget years with your initial competitive application. So there's a little just run through for everyone. I'm sure you may have questions or would like to go in more depth, but we only have time for that quick little run through. And I'm going to get back on track with the slides so that we can get to the Q&A.
I posted just for an extra link to where the supportive housing NOFO is, and on that link, if you scroll down, you can see under the important documents header the links for all of these documents that John's reviewing: the services plan, services budget, underwriting guidance, etc.
Thanks, Bryce. Okay, so another part of our requirements for this NOFO are that we're expecting applications to utilize specific supportive housing underwriting guidance. We published this last year and we updated it again this year. And this guidance can be found on the NOFO webpage. It can also be found on the tax credit webpage under the scoring documents and manuals. But I'll go through some of the specific underwriting requirements for our single site supportive housing. So your debt coverage ratio and effective gross income, nothing is really going to be different other than what the QAP indicates here. Your revenue, vacancy, and expense trends, we are looking for slightly higher vacancy projections, so looking at 7% or higher. For the developer fee, really the QAP standards apply, but anytime a developer can apply your deferred developer fee to reserves, that's going to benefit the project long term, should you choose to do that. Operating expenses, we're requiring no less than $8,000 per unit per year and that doesn't change based on the geographic pool. But this is just an acknowledgement that, in general, I think probably, operating expenses average higher than we think they do. But for supportive housing in particular, you're usually going to see higher OpEx for supportive housing, just because of the wear and tear, the added services, added security, insurance, things like that. So we just want to make sure we're not underestimating what those operating expenses are. Operating deficit reserves, the same QAP standards are going to apply, so we haven't made any real changes there. Replacement reserves, we do require a 6-month capitalized replacement reserve, and that will happen prior to conversion. And then we also added a furniture and fixtures reserve for our supportive housing developments, and that's again going to be capitalized. And then for studio and 1-bedroom units, that reserve is $2,000, and for 2 bedrooms and higher, the reserve is going to be $3,000. And the point there, obviously, is to acknowledge that the populations we're serving with supportive housing are often folks who are experiencing homelessness, or maybe folks who just don't have the means to furnish their units. And so to the extent that we can support them in that, it's a benefit to everybody. Okay, so related to kind of the underwriting and just making sure that the cost allocation is done properly, we are requiring that you all use the DCA cost allocation model. The HUD, the home cost allocation tool, is what is listed in the NOFO, and it's linked in the NOFO. We're going to update that, but just in response to a question that we received about how to best use that, we actually want to share that there's a specific DCA cost allocation model that is simpler and it's going to be more easy to use, and we've already uploaded that to the NOFO webpage. So you should see it under those important documents ready to download right away. So please use that, and I will also make sure that the NOFO gets updated as soon as possible to reflect that should be the cost allocation tool used. Okay, so I just want to quickly touch on project-based rental assistance again. We are requiring at least a preliminary commitment for project-based rental assistance, commitment being submitted and included in your NOFO application. And that's a requirement in order to be awarded. This connects obviously to the operational sustainability of the project and the underwriting, and just making sure that we're funding projects that are going to stand the test of time and be able to remain financially sustainable in the long term. Although we do not have PBVs available in 2026, we do encourage finding other opportunities for project-based rental assistance around the state. They do exist in some parts of the state, and they do exist in other forms other than PBVs. So we're encouraging creativity there. But generally, we just want to make sure that we're following best practice nationally, this is best practice with supportive housing. And so that's why we made that choice. Okay, so just kind of wrapping things up, if I just kind of want to highlight the things that would demonstrate a strong application. So we're encouraging this from everybody, and these are more like reminders of the requirements here, but I just want to put them in one place. So make sure to submit all required elements of the application. Don't leave any out. Please commit to all of the program requirements, which include the National Housing Trust Fund funding requirements. There's a section in the NOFO highlighting those. And then there's a section right below that highlighting the single site supportive housing project requirements. And so those are going to be, you can kind of consider them like threshold requirements of what we want to see for all supportive housing. And then in terms of federal cross-cutting requirements related to National Housing Trust Fund, you'll need to commit to those. And then obviously the application must be submitted by a qualified LIHTC developer, because the award under the NOFO is contingent on a LIHTC award in the 9% round. follow the underwriting guidance, and then, the higher you score in the narrative rating factors, that will also benefit the applications. So, and I'll have a couple more slides here, and then I'm going to pause. So I mentioned the requirement to be awarded in the 9% tax credit award in 2026. Probably many of you are aware that we published guidance around the 9% general set aside. So that is another piece of the ways that we're wanting to fund single site supportive housing this year. So the 9% general set aside commissioner can award up to 2 applications through the general set aside each round. It must be single site supportive housing, must be greater than 25% of the units. The requirements are essentially the same under the set aside as they would be under the NOFO. The general set aside only applies to the 2026 9% round and not any other rounds beyond that. And if you haven't found the guidance yet, it is published on our tax credit webpage at this link. We'll be sure to put the link in the chat. But in terms of our selection process for that, you will again have to meet the single site supportive housing requirements that mirror the requirements in the set aside guidance mirror, I think, verbatim the ones in the NOFO. And obviously we've done that on purpose. And make sure to submit all required documents and uploads. Those do include the supportive services plan and budget document, any commitments from service providers and things like that. And then DCA is going to select the highest scoring set-aside applications based on QAP scoring and threshold criteria. If you're applying under the general set-aside, you should not claim points for integrated supportive housing because by definition, you're applying to be developing a single site project, not an integrated supportive housing project. DCA will attempt to award new affordability and preservation, but that's subject to DCA's discretion depending on the kind of the mix of applications we receive. General set-aside applications would only compete against other general set-aside applications and won't be competing in a broader pool. However, if your project is not selected under the general set-aside pool, but it still scores well enough for selection in the competitive pool overall, we're leaving open the possibility that an application could still be awarded that way. All right, so before I stop talking, because I've been talking for a long time, I want to just let everyone know that we're currently in the process of developing what does monitoring and compliance look like for our supportive housing developments moving forward. We are anticipating adding an addendum in the LIHTC and Home Compliance Manual this year. So Dylan and folks on our team will be working on developing that and publishing it. We're going to be seeking some feedback on that proposed process over the next 1 to 2 months. So anybody who wants to provide feedback or input on how this should look, or if you have feedback on our draft process, we'd love to hear from you. So you can reach out to me if you're interested, or you can also reach out to that supportive housing at dca.ga.gov email address. So here's our timeline. This is all in the NOFO, but in the interest of just making sure we get plenty of time for questions, I will pause. And I guess I'll just answer these real quick because these are questions that came up at the QAP workshop, and I wanted to be sure that we provided an answer to them in some forum. So will only the projects that receive awards from the supportive housing NOFO be able to compete in the 9% general set-aside this year? And the answer is no. The set-aside competition is open to all applicants, regardless of whether they were awarded under the NOFO or whether they attended the Supportive Housing Institute. But on the other hand, if a development did apply under the general set-aside and was not awarded that, the same application can be considered in the general tax credit application, which I mentioned a second ago. And then can one deal apply for more than one NOFO? Meaning, could you apply for the trust fund NOFO and also apply under the home or CDBG NOFO that Bryce is going to talk about shortly? The answer is sure. You can apply for multiple NOFOs as long as your application meets the requirements. Okay, so I'm going to pause and I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that we can take a look at the questions here.
So John, I was able to summarize some of the questions in the chat. Do you want me to read those out to you now?
Yes, thank you, Turka. That's very helpful. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. So the first question, I think Bryce kind of alluded to it already, was can you confirm that an MOU agreement between developers, managers, and service providers is not required at this time of application?
Correct. And you don't have to have an executed MOU already when you submit your application to the NOFO currently. But we do at minimum want to see a letter of support from a service provider that you're working with and potentially from a referring entity that you're working with, which could be a homelessness continuum of care or something along those lines. So we want to know that the partners that you're planning on working with are bought in, but executed MOUs can happen later in the process during the threshold part of the tax credit award.
And so John wouldn't say an email saying, "Oh yeah, they contacted us, we're on board." Is that okay? Something informal like that?
It should be more formal than that. An email saying that we were contacted and we are aware of this happening doesn't demonstrate to me a partnership. So really we're looking for evidence of conversation, some level of planning, some level of, proactive buy-in from your partners.
Yeah, letter of support on some letterhead, probably better, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, the second part of that question was, if applicants submit this type of MOU agreement, does it make an application more competitive?
I don't think we added any additional points in the rating factors for having an MOU complete at this time, but it certainly does show that y'all, that the application has, put effort in up front, but there's no additional points for that.
Okay, great. You may have answered this already, but worth repeating. If my application was already submitted, am I able to submit an additional application?
Just to clarify, would the additional application be an updated application for the same project, or are you talking about a second project application?
That question was posed by Octavia. Do you want to come off mute to clarify? I can, or Dylan can do that.
I'll just, while that's happening, I'll just say we can only accept one application per applicant, so not meaning one project per applicant, no, not multiple proposed projects under this NOFO, under the same NOFO. However, if you're ready to come off mute, go ahead. I actually don't want to, speak on your behalf yet. But I'll say, go ahead, Dylan.
I was going to say, Octavia, if you could try to come off of mute, I think I've adjusted it.
Are you able to come off mute, Octavia?
Yes, I found it. Thank you for your patience. I'm new to Teams, so I was just trying to find it over here.
No problem.
Yes, I had submitted my application last week, and I know that I was advised there's a notice that said you couldn't make any changes or anything like that. So I wanted to know, do I have to reapply? Because there's some information that I learned today that would not set me up to be a winner.
Octavia, you submitted an application under the Supportive Housing NOFO already?
Oh, I thought it was the supportive housing NOFO. I will go back and check. I apologize for that. But I thought because there was it has the same deadline and everything. So I thought that I went ahead and submitted because I received the email notification that the process was open. So I went ahead and applied and I turned in all of my documents that I had. Um, but I'll go and double check. I apologize.
Mhm.
Thank you for your
It's
time, though.
okay. It's okay. And as you double check, we'll also double check with our team here, and we'll if you can email John after you do your double check, and we can follow up that way.
Thanks, Bryce. There's one more question, John, if you don't have anything more on that. And this you might want to address here or offline, but would DCA reconsider rather the requirements for PBV if the development can prove sustainability without the need for PBV based on NHTF and home payment requirements?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think so. For this round, we're not going to be able to change that requirement for this NOFO. It's something that we certainly put a lot of thought into over the last year, um, and sought out kind of guidance from other parts of the country in terms of are there ways to allow for applications to come in without that guarantee of the rental revenue coming in. Um, and what we've landed on right now is that we're not comfortable accepting applications without project-based rental assistance. I understand that there are proposals, possibilities for more creative opportunities where it is determined by the applicant that maybe PBVs aren't necessary based on the income levels of the tenants. However, at this point, we're not going to be able to reconsider that part of the NOFO. But I
Okay.
think going
Yeah.
forward, like we certainly want to, we want to identify ways to allow for supportive housing to be, created in new and different ways. So certainly open to other conversations in the future about it, but at this point, it's yeah, not something
Mhm.
we can change for this NOFO.
And if I may just add on to that, just one thing is we're still, I think, going to look at and consider internally if you have project-based rental assistance that's not vouchers, right? So we're looking for PBRA. That doesn't necessarily have to be vouchers, but we're going to look internally at that. And if there's anything that needs to be changed or updated on that kind of thing, and it's possible, we'll look at that. But I think if it's PBRA that we're concerned with, yes, John, not necessarily vouchers.
Correct. Yeah, there's that difference between PBVs, project-based vouchers, as a specific program through the Housing Choice Voucher Program, but there are other types of project-based rental assistance out there that would be eligible for this.
Okay. And then one more question just popped into the chat. And the last question, is there a minimum square footage on the housing units?
It's a good question. I don't think we put any information about that in the NOFO, but I think there is information about that in the, would that be in the architectural manual of the tax credit program, Bryce?
Yeah, with if you're talking about things like this, you actually generally start with local zoning code, and the architectural manual will refer to that as well. And so, make sure your square footage complies with local code as well as our architectural manual and state code on minimum sizes. The only thing in terms of sizes and is that home cost allocation tool that looks at the maximum amount that's going to be awarded based upon bedroom size, is not about square footage, but about based on the number of bedrooms and things like that. So um, your designs hopefully maximize all that, but any further questions on that, we can follow up with our construction manager. You can email me and we can follow up if needed.
Thanks, guys. That's all the questions in the chat.
Thanks, Tarika. All right, Bryce, your turn. Let me share my screen, get the slides up for you.
All right. Thank you all again. My name's Bryce. And my email's at the end, so just feel free to email me with any questions on these other two NOFOs that are coming out. Sometimes, like I know this already probably is a little confusing for some because most of the time you hear me, I might be talking about integrated supportive housing. And just to segue from where John was, integrated supportive housing is under the QAP. Integrated means folks with disabilities are integrated with the rest of folks who may not be living with disabilities. And so that means that there has to be a balance in populations for we define as under 25%. So when we talk about QAP and integrated supportive housing, that's under 25%. And John's NOFOs that he just talked about, single site, are all 25% and above, just so you know. So I'm not going to talk about that today, but I want to make sure that everyone was not confused. The two NOFOs I'm going to talk about today, one are the Community Development Block Grant for disaster recovery, and one on home, which we all are familiar with, but we haven't used a NOFO for in a handful of years. So it may be new again for some of you. Both these NOFOs are for low interest loan financing. And in conjunction with that, you get a preliminary commitment for a low interest loan. And that commitment can be used for favorable financing points in a conjunction with your 2026 LIHTC app. So an award under either of these two NOFOs, disaster recovery or home, can be used in a 9% round or the 4% round. And if you try to use it in 9% and don't get selected, you can use that same NOFO award for a 4% app if your project concept supports it. So it's just for 2026, though, for 2 rounds for these allocations. We did, as John mentioned, update the deadline to accommodate the Affordable Housing Coalition Conference for y'all. It's now due the week afterwards, and this April 6th award announcement date should be sufficient. Again, noting February 27th is the deadline to get your project team qualifications and qualifications determination content in, and if there's any occupied developments or relocation needs, those are also due on February 27th, some sort of preliminary issues as well. Next slide, please, John. Thank you. So on the Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery, let me pause real quick because we have Kathy Tremblay here, who is the director for the CDBG program. Kathy, if you'd like to say hello, I think it'd be worthwhile. Let me see if we can get you off mute real quick, because I believe folks already had a question. I believe it's a great time for you to introduce yourself. I'm gonna get you off mute here. If you'd like, I should be able to introduce yourself now.
Thanks, Bryce. So good afternoon, everybody. As Bryce said, my name is Kathleen Tremblay. I am the program director for CDBG Disaster Recovery here at DCA. I am kind of your one-stop shop for any questions that you have regarding CDBG-DR. I have already started receiving emails from those of you that asked for how to add yourself to our known interested parties list, so I will be sure to follow up with everyone tomorrow. And just welcome. If you have any questions, my contact information is in the chat. Feel free to use it. Thanks, Bryce.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate everything. And you brought up an important point, which I want to cover here, which I missed at the workshop, but originally I had DR as disaster relief. And as you corrected me, it's disaster recovery. And that's important because when we say disaster relief, it's focused on the short term and maybe ameliorating some of the conditions, whereas the disaster recovery frames it as long-term sustainable pathways. And so when we look at our housing that we're proposing to build here, one of the things we look at is, is there some sort of design elements to survive in the long term? So we have two buckets of disaster recovery funds. This 20 million for the 2023-2024 series of hurricanes, and there are 44 counties listed on the NOFO itself. And we'll go back to that. I'll go down to the bottom of the slide here for that real quick, where it says there are 3 set-asides within each tax credit round, right? And so that $20 million in addition to the other $2 million do have separate set-asides for the 4% and the 9% rounds, 3 awards possible per tax credit round. Both of them are linked here and do give a detailed look at the geographic eligibility requirements. So these 44 counties, you must be in those. Obviously, those were counties that were impacted from those storms. And this $2 million bucket is from 2017 disasters. As you can see, there's actually a bifurcation of the 2 million total, and because this is in some extent based upon some program income, we're going to look at the numbers, and should there need to be any correction to these numbers based upon some, we'll send out any updates to that. But right now, these are the most impacted zip codes from the 2017 hurricane and tornadoes. And these are just select zip codes and around Augusta and Brunswick, I believe. And if you're in these zip codes, you're actually eligible for the full 2 million available under the DR. And so these are the most impacted areas. And so if you have a proposal within these 5 zip codes, then you're actually going to be eligible up for the full 2 million of this second bucket. If you're not in those zip codes, you'll have to check and see if you're in one of these 14 counties that's eligible for a small portion of the total 2 million. If you have any questions, you can email Kathy or I on that. And John, you can go to the next slide. But for the total $22 million, again, there are 3 set-asides under each LIHTC round. So you can take your NOFO awards, put it into your LIHTC app, and apply under the disaster relief set-aside, disaster recovery set-aside. Thank you. Other unique requirements for this NOFO, your designs have to include that long-term feature to look at how you're going to mitigate future disasters. The NOFO lists a few. They are not exclusive. You may propose some other sort of design feature to demonstrate disaster mitigation. The same thing with the data. You must show that your community was impacted relative to the disaster, and there must be some data evidencing that. The NOFO lists some possible data points or references, but you may propose other ones, and they can speak to housing, they can speak to homelessness, they can speak to industry and economic conditions. You can use any available public data source. We, in fact, have a housing development need report, and it has a dashboard available. With our housing need development report, though, the data is only broken down by region. And so generally speaking, when we're looking at these disasters, you want to look at the communities that were impacted by disaster, not the entire region. So I would look for available public data to support evidence of hurricane impact. Thank you, John. All right. Any questions on disaster recovery, please email Kathy and I. On the home NOFO, we have $16 million available in awards from 1 to 4 million each. Again, low cost financing. The unique things about the home NOFO is the fourth bullet point here about the priority focusing on preservation developments. That means that when we look at them, it will be a priority to look at those preservation deals, but it does not exclude proposed new construction. The other issue or concern is that home cost allocation tool, which uh, does set a maximum per unit subsidy for the home assisted units. And as John mentioned, we have a customized spreadsheet for that. Other businesses, you get to flip and do an extra design and customize your homes the way you want. Here we get to customize our spreadsheets. And so we have a DCA cost allocation tool, which is customized version of this. We're going to post that on the NOFO website so you have a reference. You'll see also there will be a column for a 10% adjustment. So we say, okay, give us there's a minimum number of home assisted units that the tool will give you, and then you can propose their column for 10% more of the minimum home assisted units. That's just to give the underwriting team flexibility as they look at the subsidies that are allowed. On this last bullet point, none of the 16 million in this home NOFO will be required to comply with the Build America, Buy America requirements. However, if you're already getting money from another PHA, perhaps, that is subject to BABA, it would be helpful to know for whatever purposes that may be available. But please do note that if your deal is already getting those kinds of funds, note that in your sources and your core app. And also please note it in your narrative so that we know that you're already kind of dealing with BABA in conjunction with other funds. And it should be noted in both the disaster recovery and this home NOFO that one of the priorities is also kind of leveraging, have you gotten any other leveraged funds? And so for both these NOFOs, we're encouraging leveraged funds. Both these NOFOs have a priority that includes deeper targeting for deeper rent kind of restrictions for lower income folks, lower AMIs. And so those two priorities are there. And so should you get leveraged money, it'd be helpful. Obviously, note that all in your sources. And if it's restricted to BABA compliance, please also note that as well. All right, Joe, I'm ready for the next one. Okay, so this was some Q&A that we came across at the workshop that we're just going to iterate for everybody. So it said there was a question about what the three set-asides were. So for each LIHTC round, the 9% and the 4%, there are three set-asides. I copied the QAP set-aside language here, right? And so within each round, there will be three set-asides, up to three set-asides. The scoring criteria is the priorities and the evaluation priorities that are in the NOFO. So like I said, we've listed, will it get deeper targeting on AMI? Will there be, some leveraged funding? And then there are the other data related priorities, underwriting priorities, et cetera. All those comprise the evaluation criteria for the NOFOs. Any questions on that, you can email me. And, this last sentence, if it's a question for anybody, this basically means if there was an application for disaster recovery funds that came from Atlanta and it got an award under the disaster recovery set aside, does that award take away from Atlanta's other maximum awards? And the answer is no. The same with all these NOFOs. The set-asides do not take away from the distribution of awards across the pools, the geographic pools in the main competition. Hopefully that is understandable to everybody. Just email if not, and I'm ready for the next slide. So I just mentioned this about BABA. BABA is triggered under the trust fund and single site supportive housing NOFO. For the other two, it is not triggered. Generally, BABA is triggered for home money. And going forward in the future, as it all stands now, future home money will likely trigger BABA compliance, but not this particular home money. So if you're confused, say home money triggers BABA, this home money is not in the funding year such that it triggers BABA. So the 16 million in this home money does not trigger BABA, but if you're already working under a BABA compliance regime, again, let us know in your narrative and your sources tab. It may help for discretionary decisions. All right, next one. Can you apply to the new home NOFO and pay off an existing home loan? And the answer is no, don't use home to finance other home loans. Home is, for the construction and rehabilitation. But if you have existing home debt, you may be able to assume, the new deal may be able to assume the existing home debt. And we do have Gary Garner on the line, should anybody have further questions for that. And just in case, I will unmute Gary in case someone has any questions. But raise your hand if anyone has questions specifically on that issue. Looks like we're okay. All right, great. I don't know if there's any more slides. It turns out, by the way, with this last slide, I have tons of questions, so feel free. Please ask.
Bryce, I was able to do the same for you and summarize the questions that seem to be related to the last two NOFOs. So do you want me to read those out now? Okay.
Please. Thank you.
Sure. Your first question is, can you speak more to how an awarded CDBG-DR project would submit scoring in the 9%, 4% round? A little subtext there is, in the disaster rebuilding set aside, the QAP states scoring criteria in the QAP will not apply. DCA may develop separate scoring criteria for this set aside. So there seems to be a little confusion about that. Could you speak more on how an awarded project will submit scoring?
No problem. Yeah, so as I mentioned, for the NOFOs, the section that says evaluation priorities, those are essentially the scoring criteria. There are ranked criteria, ranking criteria, right? And so they indicate which factors we're going to focus on for higher evaluation. So with the home NOFO, preservation deals, right? For both of them, the more you can demonstrate with deeper targeting, the more you can demonstrate with leveraged funding, the more you can demonstrate with data, the more you can demonstrate with underwriting feasibility. All those work in the favor, and all those are listed in the evaluation priorities section. And hopefully that answers that question. But again, if it doesn't, and Amy, if your hand raise is related to that, we can just unmute you now so we can just follow up on that question. I'll go ahead and see. Yeah.
She's confirmed it is.
Thanks, Bryce. I think what I was trying to get at is, I understand the evaluation inside of the NOFO, but let's say, you have a 9% project that you put in, you're awarded the CDBG-DR. So when I'm putting in the 9% application in May, would that LIHTC application still have to go through the LIHTC scoring, or do I get to bypass that scoring because it's awarded under the CDBG-DR?
Yeah, so there will be, thank you, I understand. So you will actually kind of bypass it all in theory, but not in actuality, because as you go into your emphasis portal, you'll be able to select, you'll select a LIHTC application, and then you'll just be able to select that you're applying under the disaster recovery set aside. And then everything that needs to be scored or vetted, you'll submit a full app for sure, because all of the information is essential. So for the NOFO, we're not asking anyone to fill out any of the threshold or scoring except for what may be noted in the priorities, so deeper targeting, for instance. But we're not asking a full completion of the threshold or scoring sections. And so when it comes to the app, you definitely want to submit a full app because even all those priorities are kind of embodied as well in the all those threshold. Obviously, you have to meet threshold regardless, and then the scoring will, obviously important and be able to reference. So as long as you submit your full app, just check that you're applying under the set aside. That should cover it.
Thanks,
If there's
Bryce.
any, yes, is that get all of it?
Yeah, I think I guess what I'm trying to understand is when I'm looking at that scoring, then is it that I'm only applying replying to the scoring that actually was laid out in that NOFO? So deeper targeting, for example, but desirables and those kinds of things wouldn't necessarily need to be provided. I know that's like a really granular question, but trying to understand what we would provide. And if it's all of it, that's fine. Just confirming.
Yeah, you'll want all of it for sure.
Okay.
There's even I'm trying to remember if we added very peculiar tie breaks or not, but um, all of it definitely goes into the evaluation regardless, and certainly stuff that we would need to know in terms of commitments and all that.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Bryce. Thanks, Amy.
Mhm.
Can you, the next question is, can you confirm that we could show the loan as either must pay or cash flow? Subtext there is in both NOFOs, DR and home, the repayment structure is determined through underwriting, quote, determined through underwriting.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm gonna see if I can unmute Gary Garner for that. But yes, the final terms of the loan will be subject to the underwriting team and their discussions of feasibility. And I don't see Gary Garner still on here. So hopefully my answer will suffice. Um, which is that again, the underwriting team goes through, they look at feasibility, they'll have concerns. It's perhaps a situation where they're awarded regardless, but they might have, I guess you're looking at whether it's a cash flow versus maybe a hard payment kind of thing. Um, those kinds of elements, we're going to be subject to underwriting conversations.
Okay. The next question is, given the prioritization of preservation developments, would any new construction developments be considered for funding, assuming all other factors are equal?
Yeah, of course, all proposals are welcome. We're not, we don't reject, nothing's going to be rejected offhand. With the home NOFO preservation proposals are evaluated um, at a slightly higher level. I'm going to get this straight. Preservation proposals are preferred. I think that's the word I was looking for. So.
Okay. We have a couple more questions. The next question asks, will the assumption of existing home debt qualify for favorable financing points?
No, favorable financing is about, additional financial commitments for the next construction. And so, an old home debt that's already done with a kind of an existing deal doesn't bring any new favorable financing to the table, if you will. So we're only going to look at new preliminary commitments.
Okay. The next question asks, what terms are required for the funds to be considered leveraged matching funds for preference within the NOFO?
Okay, I want to make sure I get this right. Terms. Okay. So, the NOFO does a little bit of description. So housing tax, the tax credit allocation itself, or requested tax allocation does not count as third party. So it has to be a third party leverage funding. That third party does not include anything from DCA's LIHTC award. And it also can't be from an interested party. So you have to look at your QAP definition. So you can't put in I believe, your own funding. But obviously, we're looking for other third parties, sources you may be familiar with, whether it's some other sort of government entity, local, state, national, PHA, whatever it may be, tax allocation district, whatever you got, philanthropic funding. Any of those third party sources would be considered for sure.
Okay, thank you, Bryce. We have a general question. Okay, that was already answered. Somebody asked, can we provide the link to the QAP workshop slides? And the answer to that is Kim Golden will be posting the QAP workshop slides on the website. No, sorry, I read that wrong, John. That is a question.
DVD. We're trying to find out where and when we'll be able to publish those on the webpage, or if there'll be another, an e-blast or something like that where we send those out. But we'll find a way to get them out to you. And if you have a specific request for them, you can always email us directly and we'll get you those slides.
Thanks, John.
Mm-hmm.
There's a follow-up. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Bryce.
I was just going to say, yeah, there was one question, John, while you're there, that Deanna asked about. It looks like the supportive housing NOFO, which is like if they don't need the full 2 million. And Deanna, I think that's what you were talking about, supportive housing NOFO. Can you apply for less than $2 million?
We're not. We wanted to frame it as such that the minimum is 2 million and the max is the max award. So we're likely going to be funding between 1 and 2 awards in this NOFO. We want to keep it somewhat flexible. So I think if you submit your application, you say, well, we want to request 1.5 or whatever, something slightly different. I think we will determine that on a case-by-case basis through underwriting. So I hesitate to say 100% whether you should or should not apply if you only want to apply for less than 2 million, given that we did put that in the NOFO. But let me consult internally and we'll follow up on that. It's a good question though.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Bryce, do you want me to continue with the other NOFOs? Okay, so another question came up. Sure, for CDBG. So following up to the earlier scoring question, if there are more than 3 CDBG-DR awarded developments that apply in the 9% round, will you use the NOFO scoring to evaluate which of those apps are awarded credits in the set-aside, or will you use the 9% scoring to differentiate them?
The set-aside competes against other applications within the set-aside first and foremost under the set-aside. And so whether within the set-aside, it is only those evaluation priorities that are in the NOFO for those 3. If there's any need to go to general QAP stuff, I'm not certain there is, but that's a bridge that we don't cross until we need to. Thank you.
Follow up to that question, Bryce, is can a CDBG-DR awarded development that applied and is not awarded in the credit funding round set aside be awarded as part of the geographic set asides if it has a high enough credit application score?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good question. Thank you. And that's basically saying if it doesn't get awarded in the set aside, but it still scores high enough, can it kind of be awarded under the general competition, tax return competition? And I know we're allowed to do that with the supportive housing NOFO. And I want to take this question back to the team internally to see what's plausible before I answer that. So, we haven't set up a formal Q&A for these NOFOs yet, but this question may warrant it. And so I'll take a look at this question with the team, and whether through a Q&A or just something posted to the website, we will get an answer back to you on this one.
Okay. And I think this question is more of a clarification. I think you've answered about submitting more than one application. This question is would like some clarification. Can we submit for both the CDBG-DR and home NOFO for the same development proposal?
Well, part of it, yes. And so not the, if it doesn't make sense that you would have the exact same, um, because there are different NOFO requirements. So it's okay to submit under both of them, provided that your concept and all your documentation match the NOFO requirements. So, for instance, with the disaster recovery NOFO, your design has to include elements related to future disaster mitigation, which is not required in the other one. So, if you still want to customize and tailor your applications to the NOFOs, but you could still have the same site potentially and same basic capital stack perhaps. Um, but you'll want to make sure that you have, with the home, that you're not exceeding maximum subsidies, that your data, each NOFO requires data, but the data has to speak to different end results. One focused on disaster, the other focused on housing need. And so your data is different. So as long as you tailor and customize and meet the separate NOFO requirements, all the rest can stay the same.
Thanks, Bryce. I'm going to jump back up the chat to another question that was submitted regarding supportive housing. For you, John, that question was, would DCA allow an applicant that restricts units to income-based units as a project-based rental assistance commitment?
So just to make sure I understand, allowing an applicant that restricts units to income-based units as a project-based rental assistance commitment. Philip, if you could explain what you mean by income-based units, do you mean like set them at 30% AMI, or do you mean something else other than that? And maybe if we can unmute Philip.
Thank you. Yeah. So
Hey.
no, it's so project-based rental assistance is generally in a position where our tenants are income-based tenants. They're paying 30% of their income, regardless of what their income is. They still would qualify for either whatever the 60, 50, 30% set aside is set there under the LURA. So in an instance where somebody is putting together National Housing Trust Fund and home, home can be structured to where payments would not necessarily could be structured as a cash flow, could be structured as a lower amount or a 1% with a 40-year AM with a balloon payment at resyndication. I mean, there's a million ways you guys can do this. But the end result of allowing tenants to be restricting their rents to income based, you would have the exact same amount of rent burdening to your tenant as you would under like a PBV, PBRA, home flex, whatever the million different, vernacular for Section 8 is out there. And you're not, if you have a property that has little to no debt, the only thing you're really having to cover is your operations. With a strong operator, where they have strong public support, that they have a proven track record of public support of raising funds to keep their operations open. Your tenant is not being rent burdened. The property is not being doesn't really have a going concern or an issue within the underwriting. The biggest problem you're going to have on the underwriting side that Gary's going to figure out is what rents is he actually going to underwrite to show sustainability. So you can have a minimum threshold of, hey, if we're doing X number of units, this is your minimum number of, your minimum number of what your OpEx is per unit. So as long as you can show or prove, or if 30% rents in that market are going to be able to sustain the operational minimum thresholds DCA sets forth, would that be considered then a project-based rental assistance? Nobody's
Well,
issuing. Yeah, I mean, you asked for creative answers. I'm
hey,
trying to throw a creative solution out there.
I do want to applaud the creativity and your yeah, your question here. I don't think I'll be able to like give you much of an answer here on the spot, but um so let me think about it, and we'll have to kind of consult internally on whether there's any kind of like, yeah, any flexibility in what we've already published. It's tough at this point to change the NOFO substantively like this. So I'll just say that, but certainly do appreciate the
No, and
yeah,
I'm not
the
asking to
creativity.
change the NOFO. All I'm
Yeah.
asking is that, the comment earlier, my first comment was that PHAs aren't putting out project-based vouchers, PBRA contracts out right now. The very few states not the very few ones that have the ability to don't have the ability to mobilize something in time for this NOFO submission.
Right.
It could be that there is going to be that diamond in the rough that is prepared for this, is set for this, was part of the Supportive Housing Institute, knew this was coming and did it. But for others, people who might have done the Supportive Housing Institute but are looking at deals in rural Georgia, for instance, where there is no um, agency or ability to get a project-based rental assistance contract, having the ability to say, hey, if the sponsor can show a project-based rental assistance contract, it's within the spirit of what we're trying to do here. That's all.
Yeah.
Right. If I can, when we talk about PPRA, if you're talking kind of like a philanthropic sponsor-based PPRA, I think that already does fall in the realm of possibilities of existing PPRA. But one thing I'm realizing is we will establish a little Q&A for this. There are a couple questions that we do have to go back, think about, and publish a more comprehensive, detailed answer. So we will post a Q&A, at least with 2 or 3 questions. Hopefully not too many more than that, but we will do that and respond to these more complicated questions that way.
Thanks, guys. Do we have time for a few more?
Sure.
I can do a couple. I see the one from
Yeah.
Anna Marie. Supportive housing underwriting guidance states for units dedicated to supportive housing in the operating expense section. Does that mean not all units have to be underwritten at 8,000 a unit? If not 100% supportive housing. So Bryce, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the answer is yes. We're just talking about underwriting the specific supportive housing units at 8,000 a unit. But if you have other affordable units on the property that are not specifically supportive housing, those are not subject to the 8,000 per unit OPEX.
Yeah. I think that's actually that phrase for the supportive housing was written because that underwriting guidance can apply to was generally going to apply to other things programs. But if you have 100% supportive housing units, then it applies. But if you say 90% of our units are going to be supportive housing units, then those 90% of the units will have that OPEX minimum. But for the 10% of units that aren't supportive housing units, then they would go under the regular QAP requirements. But we mostly expect maximum feasibility when 100% of the units are supportive housing units. All right. Hopefully that works for that one.
And then Bryce, there's one more update from Amy. That last question there regarding CDBG-DR. I can read that out. Rephrasing the most recent scoring question. If more than 3 CDBG-DR awarded applications are submitted, what is the tiebreaker that's used? Is the first part of that question. The second part is, does the QAP tiebreaker come in? Would the highest LIHTC scoring criteria win, or would the CDBG-DR NOFO criteria be utilized?
We're going to stick with the NOFO criteria. But again, you'll want to submit a full LIHTC application. You just want to do your best. So let me help you this way. Those evaluation priorities, even though they're just a handful of bullet points, can capture a lot of information. And so when you look at the bullet point that says, give us data that supports your housing development need, the application with the more substantive, accurate, up-to-date kind of best data analysis will very well get evaluated higher than an application that has scant or scant data or poor analysis. And so if you want to make sure you're evaluated higher, focus on those priorities in the NOFO, more detail, more supporting documentation, whatever methods. If you're looking at the DR, the more designs you propose, the more effective the designs you propose, all those will go into your evaluation. So I would focus on the quality of the information and you submit and supporting documentation within the NOFO priorities.
Just a quick follow-up on the previous question about the QAP workshop slides. We will be sending those out as an e-blast to anyone who's on our tax credit listserv through DCA. You'll get those slides pretty much any minute now or sometime today, sounds like. So we won't be posting them on the webpage, but they will be coming out via email shortly.
That looks like everything in the chat, John and Bryce.
Well, that's great. Thank you, Tariq. Thank you, Dylan. Thank you, all of us here at DCA who showed up to support us, and for all of you out there who showed up to listen. I just am enthused by all the interest and the fact that people want to help residents in all these different 3 unique subpopulations, help them get use these allocations and get folks housed. So I'm appreciative. You have all the email contact for John and I and Kathleen for the CDBG-DR stuff. Please feel free to email us. We'll also post a formal Q&A document on the website and let everyone know for any outstanding questions that still exists. And John, if there's anything else you'd like to say.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you all.